serving veterans via education and resume writing services since 2005. I literally live 2 miles from the flight line at Luke Air Force Base. And so I just called them up one day and said, hey, I really like to teach resume writing. Do you need any help? And I've been volunteering out there at least every other month ever since then. So I know that the resume is not something that people love to talk about. And I also know, because I used to teach the transition assistance program, that the amount of information that's out there and available to you about the resume is, we'll just call it somewhat lacking. And so I try to be that voice out there talking about the resume and giving you education and information. I do a lot of work around kind of trying to change your mindset about the resume. And I'll talk about some of those things today as we go through this. We had, I think it was 20 submissions, right, Peter, of resumes. So there's no way we can get through all of them, right? But I picked 6 at random. Peter's like, you need to pick which ones you're going to do. And I said, I can't, don't make me pick. I don't want to. And so I just kind of randomly clicked on them and have made some notes in there. But what I did is I went through all of them and I saw some very common issues among the resumes. And I want to touch on the common issues first and what we can do about those. And then we'll go through some of the one-on-one resume reviews. So if your resume is not among the ones that I go through live on the screen today, there's still going to be a lot of information that I think that you can take away from when I talk about all the other things. So one of the biggest, most common issues I saw in the resumes that were sent in, but it's an issue that I see almost always, especially with transitioning service member resumes, is there is no focus. So I should know from the very first lines of your resume exactly what kind of a job you're targeting. It should jump off the page at me that I know exactly what you're doing. So if your summary says you're a operations manager, program manager, project manager, human resources manager, and a beer brewer, what kind of job are you looking for, right? And so if that's what your resume says at the very first line, an employer looks at that and says, well, which one of those do they want to do? And why are they applying for my job as a security manager when their resume says they do all of these other things? And what they say to themselves is, this person doesn't know what they want to do, and so they're not going to stay. And so I'm going to move on to the next candidate. And they don't even call you and give you a chance. So from the very first line, when someone reads your resume, they should know exactly what your target is. And the rest of your resume from that point on is supporting evidence that you're qualified to do that job, right? So that's what I need you to think about your resume as. It's supporting evidence that shows from your past experience and accomplishments that you're qualified to do the job that you're targeting. And one of the things that people often fail to realize is that their resume is, well, their resume should be focused on where they're going and not where they've been. But your resume is a work history, isn't it? Kind of, right? So your resume is, as I said, supporting evidence that you're qualified for where you want to go. And so if we focus too much on where we've been, then it looks as though you still want to be a sailor, an airman, a coastie, a Marine, a soldier, right? That's not where you're headed anymore. You're headed to what's next. So I really want your resume to focus on where you're going. And that really honestly goes for your LinkedIn profile as well. So your LinkedIn profile needs to match up to your resume and really showcase where you want to go next, okay? So that lack of focus is one of the biggest issues. Anyone that's listened to my podcast has heard me talk about focus. I say it a lot because it is one of the biggest issues. And when you don't have a focus for your resume is full of irrelevant information. What we make the employer do is hunt for the good stuff. We make them work to figure out, why are we qualified? And when you make them work for you, they're not going to do it. They're going to move on to the next person that made it very easy to figure out what they want and why they're qualified to do it. So make their life easy. Okay. So focus, really, really important. And again, if you've listened to the podcast, I've talked about the fishing example, but I'm going to throw it out here now, just in case you've never heard me talk about this before. But remember, if you go out fishing in the Pacific Ocean and you don't know what kind of fish you're trying to catch, you are going to come home saying there are no fish in that ocean because you didn't take the right tackle, you didn't take the right bait, you didn't go to the right part of the ocean to fish, right? If I want to catch a tuna and I'm fishing in cold water on the bottom of the ocean, I'm not going to catch a tuna and I'm going to come home and say, there's no fish in that ocean. So if you're approaching your job search right now and you're saying, there's no jobs out here, no one's hiring, I know that's not true. What they're hiring are they're hiring people that can add value to their company that know exactly what they want to do. And so the first most important step in this process is figuring out what kind of a resume am I writing and really laser focusing on kind of what you want to do. So that's the other biggest issue that I saw was that these resumes were really generic. They were like a 10,000 foot view of your skills, right? And so they were very broad. It's kind of like I want to try to appeal to everyone. Well, does anybody know who you appeal to when you try to appeal to everyone? I bet Dion knows because he's heard me say this before, right? So no one, right? You appeal to no one. And so everyone looks at that resume that's a generic resume trying to appeal to everyone. And they're like, I have no idea what this person does. I'm going to move on to the next candidate. So you've got to be a specialist. And everyone says, but I'll narrow my aperture. I'll if I go down too narrow, then I'm going to miss all of these employers. So maybe you want to be an operations manager or a project manager. That needs two different resumes. And that's okay. It's your same experience, but you focus on different things in those two different resumes. Okay. So don't try to go too broad. Don't write a generic resume. Figure out your specialty, and then you'll know exactly what you want to focus on, what you want to write about. Okay, what accomplishments do you highlight? What skills do you focus on? How do you translate your military terminology? And you learn how to do that by knowing exactly where you're going. Okay. The third thing I brought to you that I saw as a commonality is that your resumes are missing measurables, like numbers, impact statements, right? So what was the result of what you did? Like, how did your work impact your organization? Did you save money? Did you reduce accidents? Did you increase retention rates? Did you increase productivity? Did you decrease safety incidents? Did you reduce your repeat recur rate? Did you increase your equipment availability? How did you make an impact? And those numbers really speak to the employer. Those numbers help them see, oh, I see the value of what you did. And now I see how I can take that and plug it into my company, and you can help me make money or save money. That's what they want to know. How are you going to make them money or save them money? You've got to really identify what makes you good at what you do. Okay. When you write a bullet point on your resume, after you've written it, I want you to ask yourself, so what? Like, have I answered the so what question? So what did that do? So what did that save? So what value did that add? Keep asking yourself that question about your bullet points until there's an answer for everyone. And whenever possible, I want it to be a measurable. Now, there's not measurables for everything, right? Human resources, it's hard to put a measurable, but you could increase retention. You could improve employee satisfaction rates through climate surveys. There are measurables that you can put in there. So we really could come up with a measurable for just about every career field out there. Some are easier than others, but there are measurables. So really think about what are your results? And so instead of just saying, I did this, let's focus on, I made this impact because I did this, okay? And the last kind of commonality I want to talk through is that we're not translating your military skills. I still see a lot of military terminology in the resumes. You know, they don't need to know what brigade you were in, you know, that you were 3rd Infantry, 4th Battalion, 6th Brigade, all of that. That doesn't need to be on there, right? That you're in the 56 LRS in the Air Force. So we don't need that. We're not translating our job titles. And so we want to translate your job titles. You don't want to put NCOIC. You don't want to put infantryman. You don't want to put command master chief. You know, you want to translate what that means in terms of the private sector and where you're going. Okay. So we want to translate both our military skills and our military job titles. And remember, you are in the elite 1% that has served in the military. And there is a very high percentage of people that to them, you speak a foreign language. And so again, when you visit a foreign country that doesn't speak English, you don't expect them to adapt to you when you get off the airplane. You figure out how to adapt to that foreign country, whether it's through a translation app or you study the language. But you need to do the same thing here as you're transitioning out of the military. And as you're transitioning out of the military and into the private sector, you want to make sure that that you're translating your terminology. And so, you know, that takes some research. That takes things like, you know, doing some research through job postings, through informational interviews, but be sure that you're starting to speak the language of the industry and companies and where you want to go. Okay. So I'm going to do a screen share. We hope this works and that you can see it. And we'll go through some resumes kind of one by one. And if, again, as I said, if yours is not one of those that we selected, that my random dart throwing selected, then I will, if you reach out to me and yours isn't selected, please reach out and I will talk through some things with you. But I think you're still going to get some value from it as we go through the different resumes. So let me pull this up. And can everybody see that? Peter, will you let me know if that's visible?
Good to go. I can see the top part all the way down to the word algorithms. Now zooming out, can see most.
Good?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So this big orange block is one of the ways that we just kind of redacted the contact information. We didn't want to put your phone number and email out there for everyone to see. So one of the things I want you to take a look at with this resume is, so here's what happened is you uploaded it in probably either Word or PDF. I got it as a PDF and then I converted it back out to Word so that I could make notes and make some changes if I needed to redact some things. Do you see how the formatting went a little haywire? Like there are things like these little lines got moved. There are some spacing issues here. There's some like right in here, we have some issues. So remember that the less formatting, the less complicated formatting that you have in your resume, the better it's going to transfer into that employer's system. Okay. So let's start just from the top and we'll kind of work our way to the bottom. The first thing I want to talk about is this summary. So this person starts off with IT manager and US Marine Corps veteran. And I'll know you're a veteran as I look at your experience. It's not something that you need to lead with in your summary. Again, your Marine Corps is where you've been. What I want you to focus on is where you're going. It goes on to say, with adept knowledge and exposure to IT systems and components, leveraging numerous certifications. That's really general. So what kind of certifications? What is your area of expertise in IT? This person happens to be managing like a Geek Squad team, so they're really good at tech support. And so maybe that's something that you want to say instead. So the more specific you can be with that first sentence, the better, okay? The way I like to start off a summary section is, what do you do? How many years of experience do you have? What's the scope of what you've done? And why are you good at it? That's really what you should cover in a summary. This is a good length for a summary. I say like 5 to 7 lines max. It's not a place that people are going to spend a lot of time. It should just be an overview, okay? Now, I did say here, I don't recommend justified spacing. So you can see it's justified, which spreads it out. And the reason I don't like it is because it puts in extra spaces in weird places. So it looks like a mistake. I would rather see you go with the centered spacing or left justified, okay? I talked about the being careful of formatting issues. The best way to put something like this line in, instead of drawing it in and knowing that it might get moved like one did, is you highlight it and you put in a border. That's all you have to do, okay? And if you move these guys right here, then it just follows along with your margins, okay? And that's another thing, is the margins on this are set very strangely, and so that's why it kind of is. So try to get a nice consistent template of your margins, okay? So here I want to talk to you about what I recommend. So this is how the resume came. It says Best Buy, San Angelo, Texas, January 17th to present, manager of the Geek Squad. And this is a little bit backwards. This is my recommended layout on your resume. Job title, who you work for, city, state, dates, okay? The reason this is my recommended layout on a resume is that the eye that skims the resume, it looks for job titles first. So they should be left justified. They should be the first thing that happens on the margins. On the left margin, they should be the one that's bolded. I don't care that you worked at Best Buy or what your dates were. I care about what your job title was, okay? I want you to highlight this IT support team manager, and it needs to be on the left margin. Also, when an applicant tracking system software reads your resume, we want to make it easy and consistent for where your job titles are, okay? So the this is kind of their lead-in paragraph. I like to do, like, once, right as you write, you have your job title, who you work for. Right underneath that, I like a 3 to 4 line scope of duties. So I rewrote this and I said they led a 7-person IT tech support team that received and resolved an average of how many? I would say how many daily, weekly, or monthly, whatever number they have. Like, give me a scope of what you've done. Tell me the kind of tickets you respond to. And then they talk about that they're a subject matter expert, but they don't tell me in what. Answer that question, okay? Here's an example of like where we could add a so what statement. We have analyzed processes and identified, remedied numerous deficiencies, developed an SOP that drastically enhanced team output and customer service. What does drastically mean? That's very non-specific. If we could put a number in there that said increased team productivity 72% and improved customer service scores 27% after developing a SOP that enhanced. So, I mean, there's things we could do. Like, let's start off with some measurables. So that's an example of how to get a so what. in there, okay? Now, this person is working in this role right now, but they're talking in the past tense. So I'm kind of confused by that. So if you're in a job currently, you should be speaking in the present tense. So, but I do have a caveat here. If you're transitioning out of the military and you're writing your resume today, you're transitioning out of the military in say March of 2023, I want you to put an end date to your service and I want you to speak in the past tense. It's a psychological, like I'm finished with the military and I'm ready to move on to what's next. But if you're working for someone like Best Buy right now and you are there and it's to present, this should be in the present tense. I hope that makes sense. And please put questions in the chat and I will leave time at the end to come back and answer them, okay? And then as I come down here into the bottom, I just want to served as is a very passive word. So we want to use, whenever possible, action verbs, things that we can really talk about what we accomplished, okay? So let me go to our next one. Well, you know what? Why don't we take some, if there are any questions on that one, why don't we take those first, Peter? What do you say?
Definitely. That's a great idea. And then if anybody wants to send a question in, but doesn't necessarily want it, I just put a mint in my mouth. I apologize in advance. Doesn't necessarily want it in the general chat. You can shoot it to me on the side. I'll ask Lori for you. That goes for the whole presentation. If there's any time you have a question, shoot it to me. Anything you're unsure about, there's no bad question.
So if anybody has any questions specifically about that resume, let me know. Otherwise, we will move on to the next one. I don't see anything specifically about that. I do see a question from Honey, I think it is, about good resources to help translate military roles into private sector language. So what I will say to that is there are lots of options out there. Start with the ONET. ONET has a crosswalk where you can put in your military occupation code, specialty, AFSC, whatever it is that you, branch of service you're in. And it will give you kind of a printout of what that translates to. Now, I think it sells you short, personally. So what I would do is pull a, let's say you're a 21 Bravo. I don't even know if that's a thing, right? So let's put your military occupation code in and print that out, and then go in and let's say I want to be an IT manager. I want to be a help desk leader. I want to put that into ONET and print that out and start to see what crosses over. Okay, so ONET's the first place I'd start. The next thing I would do is I would go out and I would read a lot of job postings in what I want to do. And if I came across something I didn't know what it was, then I would Google it and I would look it up. And then you look at it and you go, oh, I know exactly what that is. I just call it this. That's your translation right there. The next thing I would do is I would set up informational interviews. I would do a targeted search on LinkedIn and I would look for people who either had been in the role that you had been in your branch of the military, or just were in the military and are in the role that you want, and ask them for 15 minutes of their time and ask them to provide some information on the kinds of skills you want. And if they say something you don't understand, ask them for clarification. I call myself bilingual. I say that I speak military and civilian. Like, I am a civilian. I've never served in the military, but I fully speak fluent military. And the reason I do is because every time someone said something to me I didn't understand what they meant, I said, stop, explain that to me. And you know what I do when they say that to me? I spit it back to them in civilian language. And I say, oh, you're talking about this. And so I'm teaching them to speak civilian at the same time they were teaching me to speak military. And so it's a process, but it is definitely something that you're going to have to work at, but start talking to people that are in industry, that where you want to go. And you just have to start thinking about things different. You call them soldiers today. On your resume, call them your teammates, your coworkers, your employees, right? So you're a personnelist right now in the military. In the private sector, you're in human resources. So again, it's just a different way of looking at things, okay? So let's go on to our next resume.
I've got 2 more in here. Would you like me to wait until the end for these ones, or would you?
Yeah, if they're not related to that last resume, what do you think?
Awesome.
Okay.
It's up to you. Yeah. Hey, so Carlos and Eric will answer those at the end. If it's super urgent, or you got to hop off, just go ahead and shoot me a message directly, and I'll make sure we get an answer for you.
Okay, so let's go to the next one. Let me get this bigger.
Also, yeah, Lori, while you get that up, to Honey's question, this is obviously industry dependent, but there's a lot of websites out there like With You With Me, for instance, in the cyber and IT field that allows you to do like a skills matching thing. And so you can go in, enter what you've done in the military and see what skills are relevant to that role. While it may not, some of them will, but while some may not give you an exact job title, you can at least see like, okay, wow, they're right. I actually did a lot of, XYZ in the military. Okay, what civilian roles demand that a lot of, if you're a logistics officer, it might be a lot simpler of a translation, but still having those skills highlighted will give you a good idea of what civilian roles have more of a carryover.
Okay. Yeah, good, definitely good advice. There's so many resources out there. I know it's a stumbling block, but it is something that you absolutely can get beyond. So it's just it takes some research. I really don't know how we would live without Google, because Google will answer lots of questions for you. But that is the best place to start, or some of those resources that I gave you and that Peter gave you. And the rest is really just conversations and talking it through with people. So the next resume I pulled up, I know that this was prepared by a local nonprofit that does free resumes. I know that because they all look exactly the same. They look and read the same. I can spot them a mile away. And so what these are, and I'm absolutely advocate for going out and getting help, free help with the resume, because it allows you to get your thoughts on paper. It allows you to start that process of taking a military career and condensing it into a 2-page resume, which is a big step forward, right? But I want you to think of these free kind of templated resumes as your starting point. You shouldn't use this as the one and only resume that you use. You shouldn't let them, hand it to you and you're like, okay, I can run with this and use this to apply for jobs. And I want to talk a little bit about why. Let's look at this summary. First of all, it's really broad and very unfocused. And even from the very beginning, it says program manager in logistics management, but it goes on to say they're an aviation program management professional. They have program management, human capital management, training and development, logistics. There's so many things covered in there. It's like I'm just trying to throw something at the wall and see what sticks. And so this is a starting point, right? You've probably heard them talk about a master resume in the TAP program. That master resume is really just an information housing place that really should never see an employer's desk, right? So think of this as kind of that beginning point of that master overall resume, but you really have to target and focus it whenever possible, okay? And so again, I said that here, it should be your starting point and then target it, okay? Now, this one starts right off with U.S. Navy veteran. That's where they've been. Right? Again, I'm going to look down here and see they're a Navy veteran. I don't need to know that right off the bat. So a resume is a generally accepted 10-year picture of your work history. And you see this one says 20 plus years here and 30 years in the Navy here. So what do I know about this person when they say 20 years here and 30 years here? I know their age, first of all, right? I know that they're retiring. And I also know when they retire, they're going to get a pension. And some employers, I won't say all, but some employers will lowball you on salary, knowing that you're getting a pension. So I like to highlight your last 10 years, 15 years max, and say, and we try to leave the word retired out of the conversation. Retired brings up an image of you're finished, you're older, you're done, you don't have the, there's all things that come with that, right? And so you enjoyed a successful career in the US Navy, and you're now ready to leverage the skills and knowledge you gained into a new career. That's how you want to focus it, okay? I also want you to stay away from these third person verbs that have the S's on the end, right? So some of you are probably not as old as me, but I don't know if you remember Jimmy from Seinfeld, right? Like Jimmy does this and Jimmy does that, and he talked about himself in the third person. And so when you're writing in that third person, saying serves, possesses, manages, what you're doing is talking about yourself like Jimmy from Seinfeld. So I don't want you to be Jimmy from Seinfeld. I want you to talk about yourself in the first person. So when we write a resume, we're basically saying the word I, but we're taking it out. I, me, and my. It doesn't go in the resume, but instead of saying possesses a comprehensive background, it'd be like I possess. So we take the I out and we just say possess a comprehensive background, right? So we take out those S's. No third person verbs in your resume, okay? This is fine to have a list of core competencies in here and skills, but if it's not focused, it's not going to do you any good. And this actually list of skills happens to be in a table. So what they've done is they've inserted a table to put these in and line them all up nicely. And applicant tracking systems cannot read tables, text boxes, or headers. So also for up here, if I inserted this information in a header, if I had to double click it to edit it, it would be in a header, and my resume couldn't be read by an ATS. So all of this doesn't go into the ATS because it can't read it. So just so you know, columns are fine, but tables, text boxes, and headers cannot be read. Now, I do not recommend this, saying US Navy, various locations, and your entire 30-year career in the Navy. For the reasons that we talked about earlier, but also because when an applicant tracking software is pulling information from your system, what it does is when it sees these dates, it loads everything below it into one section. And if you can imagine, they don't have room for all of this in one section. So some of it gets left off. So it's better, instead of writing it like this, to write job title, US Navy, and the dates. Job title, US Navy, and the dates all through your resume, okay? Don't try to lump it into one section, okay? Also, I want an end date to your service. I want this to be a date in the future, because if you're in the Navy and it says to present, it's not like you can quit, right? It's not a job you can give 2 weeks notice and quit. So I want you to put an end date there so that people see when you're available. So if it says November 2022, and I need you to start yesterday, I may not call you, right? But if you're a great candidate and I think I can wait for you, at least I know that I can't bring you on board for another 4 months. At this point, 3 months. But So that, again, I just recommend you put that end date in the resume. Okay. And so just a typo here, this one right here, led. So we're supposed to be speaking in the past tense, and the past tense of to lead is led, LED, one of the most commonly misspelled words on a resume. The other one is manger as opposed to manager. When you take out that extra A, changes the name of that word. Those are the two most commonly misspelled words on a resume. And there are no results in this resume in terms of how'd you make a difference? What did you do? What did you impact? Right? So how was the organization better from what you did? Right? So that so what question. There are measurables in here. I see how much things were worth. I see how much budgets were. I see how many people you managed, and that's great. But what was the impact? How did you make a difference when you did that? Okay. And so again, this is just the way that I would recommend how you rewrite it. I think that these two jobs really could go into one block, right? They're both operations manager roles. They're both logistics. And that is another common issue I saw as I went through all the resumes is I know in the military, if you're doing a good job, you change jobs a lot oftentimes, especially as an officer. You're going to change everyone. Maybe you get to stay 2 years. And that's a little overwhelming for someone in the private sector to see 6, 7, 8 jobs in a 10-year period. They look at that because in our world that we call those job hoppers. And I know you had no control over it, but remember, they're viewing your resume with their lenses on, right? And they have the lens of the private sector employer. So just keep that in mind. And whenever you can consolidate and streamline your timeline and group together similar roles, it's going to work better for you. In the education, just so you know, that it should always be Bachelor of Science, Master of Arts, no S's on those. That's the right grammatically correct way to do that. And for dates of education, I don't recommend you put them on unless they are to explain a gap in employment. So maybe you've been in school the last 2 years and you want to showcase that you just graduated, or maybe you're in a very highly technical career field like IT or engineering. Your date of education could be really important, but my date of education was a really long time ago, before most of you were born. And I don't want to tell you that because that makes me look old and makes my education look outdated. So I don't want to put that on there. Okay. Any questions on this resume that I can answer before we move on to the next one?
Lori, I think something you said is just worth reiterating one more time, because as I was listening to you say it, I realized that my own resume has this issue all over. And that's when you're quantifying something for a bullet, it doesn't necessarily, just having a statistic in there doesn't make it demonstrating any impact. For instance, saying I manage $17 million of equipment.
Great.
Okay. Yeah.
What'd you
So
do with
what?
it?
Right, Lori's question. And so that's something I find myself falling into a lot, is like I put a statistic and I think that I've covered it, but I haven't. So I just wanted to reiterate what you had said, Lori.
Yeah. And so I think I had Michael McCoy, who is a recruiter and a guardsman on the show. He's a Verizon recruiter, so he's actively recruiting for Verizon, and he's an officer in the Tennessee National Guard. And he has a great soundbite from this, and it basically said, "Great, so you manage $17 million of equipment. What did you do with it? Did you increase equipment availability? Did you optimize the equipment usage? Did you increase the quality assurance rates? Did you bring it into compliance? Like, what did you do with that equipment?" Well, I managed it. Okay, but what did you do in that management? How did you make it better? Right? So and so that's really what you want to talk about. And I know what you want to say is like, well, I didn't do that. We did it. And so it's changing your mindset from the we to the I, they're looking to hire you, not your team. And I know you don't need to take credit for everything, but you do need to be able to say, here's how I made an impact. Okay. So let's go on to the next one. If I remember correctly, it's very similar. Let me see here. I have to find it.
Awesome. And while you find it, I know we saw I saw a question up here about resume formatting and like preferred ones. There's a bunch by industry, and Lori, I'll let you touch on that at the end a little. I don't want to jump the gun or anything, but we did have a decently good one submitted that's ATS friendly by Stephen Semmelroth as well. Stefan Semmelroth. Sorry for pronouncing your name. And I'll be happy to send that out after as well, along with the recording of this call. And so if you miss anything, we'll have it to you after as well.
Okay, perfect. Let me just, I think I had that one closed, the next one closed down. So I apologize. I was not as ready as I thought it was. So, all right.
Demiria, don't tell him. Come on.
Yeah, whatever. I'm an open book. Sometimes I screw up. It happens. Okay. So let me get this one bigger. Make it so we can see it. Does anybody recognize this format?
Looks like there might be a table in there somewhere.
This is, again, another one done by the same nonprofit. And I just wanted to bring this one up because it looks almost exactly the same, and it really has some of the same issues. We need to translate our job titles and be careful, because sometimes what it looks like you do is it looks like you go backwards. So here they have themselves as the director, and then they go to the human resources manager, and a director is above a manager. So why'd you take a step back? So be careful of how you kind of classify what you do. There are a lot of jobs on this resume. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 jobs in 12 years. That is too many jobs. So in a 10-year period, I'd like you to showcase no more than 4 or 5 jobs. And so there are a lot of places I think that this resume can be consolidated, where you're doing the same job, but maybe you're doing it in different locations for different sizes of teams. But let's just say that in this time frame, it was 1,100 personnel, but in this time frame, it was 1,300 personnel. I could just say for up to 1,300 personnel. There's nothing wrong with consolidating and streamlining your timeline, okay? So I just wanted to show you how similar these two were, and some of those issues with streamlining the timeline, okay? The next one I want to talk about, I'll get to that one. Again, I'm not telling you not to use those services. I think they're great. I just want you to make it your own, right? So I can't tell you how many times I've been in an interview with someone and I've said, hey, tell me about this bullet on your resume. And they say, I don't really know what that means. The person that wrote my resume just put it there. Can you imagine if that was an actual job interview? So it's great to get help with your resume. Like, I write resumes for people for a living, but I don't do it for them. I do it with them, because you have to be able to take that resume and speak to it in an interview. You have to know intimately every word of that resume and every number and where those numbers came from and what they mean. Because a resume, sure, it's important, but it's only step one. No one's going to look at your resume and go, oh my, this resume is so amazing, I'm going to hire this person without talking to them. No, your resume is just in the door for an interview. And if you can't speak to that resume in your interview, you're not going to get very far. Okay. So it's really, really important that you can speak to it. Okay. So again, we've talked about the veteran thing being the very first day. Just don't think it's important right there. I'm going to see you're a veteran by reading. I see U.S. Army right here. So again, focus on where you're going, not where you've been. So these are columns, absolutely fine. Can anybody see inconsistencies in the formatting of this? So there are different fonts in here and there are different font sizes. I don't know if that was a going from PDF to Word issue, but you need consistency. Do you think it's important for a financial management analyst to have attention to detail? Probably. If you're managing my money, I'd like you to have that attention to detail. And so you might tell me, oh, I have very great attention to detail. I'm going to believe what I see. And if I don't see attention to detail in your resume, I'm not going to believe you have it. Okay. So that inconsistency tells me more than you know, right? I think this used to be a federal resume because it's got things like how many hours they worked a week and what their GS level was. That's not necessary on a private sector resume. So just know today, I'm talking about private sector resumes. Federal resumes are a whole different ballgame. But you can't use a federal resume in the private sector, and you can't use a private sector resume in the federal government. So they do not cross over. Okay. This resume happens to be 3 pages. You get 2 pages, period. No more than 2 pages. I've written resumes for wing commanders, and I wrote the resume for the Force Master Chief of the Pacific Fleet of the Navy. And if that person can be on 2 pages, we all can, okay? If you're on more than 2 pages, then you're giving them too much information. And as I go back in this person's resume, there's lots of information in here that we don't need. This is university leadership activities, this is professional affiliations. There's a lot of stuff in here that doesn't need to be in here. There's a lot of extra space. So we don't need all of this in here. So again, there are ways that we can, look at, there's like 4 hard returns here. So there are some ways that we can condense this. I think they can get themselves onto 2 pages. Okay. I know we're running out of time, and I want to get to my last 2. Am I missing any questions, Peter, that I need to touch on?
We've got a couple for the end, but
Okay.
not resume specific ones.
Okay. I hope everybody can see this. Will you tell us in the comments if you're able to see the resume and if this format of how we're doing things is working for you? I would really like to hear from you about that. So that if this is something we decide we're going to do on a regular basis, if you could give us any input on how you'd like this, if this has been helpful to you, I would love to hear from you because I'm just want to educate you as much as possible. So this is one of the better resumes that we received. I do still have a few things that we can talk about here. Again, we start off with 3 adjectives that I would rather, instead of you using these adjectives, you prove it to me. You tell me you're a human capital strategist with 10+ years of, and again, don't say proven operational success, prove it to me. So 24 years of experience leading innovative programs such as, so give me an example. Prove that to me. Don't just assert that you have a skill or that you are an adjective. Prove it to me with stories and examples. Okay. So again, here we have U.S. Air Force, March 98 to present. So we have kind of lumped everything together and we've gone way too far back in our work history. Also, I recommend putting an end date here. These 2 jobs definitely could be combined. They're both HR business partner roles. So it could be HR business partner, and then it should say United States Air Force, July of 2019 to whatever the end date is, and then combine them. Okay. See, here is an HR person and they gave us measurables. this is great, right? So we've got measurables. Increased onboarding 40%. I'm thinking that means onboarding efficiency or productivity, but I don't know exactly what that means. So I would love some more clarification on that. And what I see is we've got these two bullet points with great results. And I know that we're taught in the TAP program, the STAR method, which stands for situation, task, action, result. I like to write in the RATS format, results. Tell me your results first. Saved 40% in the onboarding process. Start with that and then tell me how you did it, right? So, decreased or increased retention 28%. Start with that, then go on to tell me how you did it, okay? Start with those results. And then again, we've got HR business partner, senior HR manager, HR compliance and operations manager. Again, it's a nice, easy flow, 3 jobs. It showcases leadership experience. You don't need to know where you did it and sort of in the city and state, location, country. I just need to know that you did it for the United States Air Force, okay? And everywhere you see the city and state here, it should say, instead, it should say United States Air Force. Again, we're trying to make sure that the applicant tracking software can read our resumes effectively. Okay, then we get down here, it should be Master of Arts. And this person has a PHR and an APHR certification. I would absolutely come up here and add that PHR to the end of my name. So it would be Lori Norris, comma, PHR. Because if I'm applying for an HR position, they want to know that I have a certification. So good job. I do think you could take it to the next level with just a few of those additional items. So, all right, that is all I'm going to share for today on the resume. So I'm going to come out and answer whatever questions I can in the time that we have left.
Awesome. Sweet. Well, I'll go ahead and ask them to you in the order in which I received them in the chat. So we answered the additional resources. Now, here's a question. How does one get leadership experience across? Where and how on their resume?
Where and how? If you are a leader and have been a leader for your entire career, the where is interwoven through the accomplishments and the experience section, and the what makes you a great leader, what makes you good at leading people should be in your summary. And so I don't know exactly what you mean by that, but I would say that you're going to prove it by telling the stories of maybe how you turned around a project that was behind schedule, or maybe how you took over a team that was underperforming and took them from worst to first. So that would be some of the ways that you could do that. Tell me stories and examples of how your leadership made a difference in your former organization. So Eric, I think that was your question. Did that help? Okay, excellent.
Definitely, yeah. And I think, Lori, you're spot on there. The results of your, I don't really love this word, but the results of your subordinates will speak for you.
Yeah.
The next question I had, that's a really good question, is if you're working in a 10 to 15 year resume, how would you bridge a 15-year long gap? Meaning if you were, let's say in the Marine Corps, you got out in 92, you did 10 years in the private sector and then a 15-year gap due to personal reasons. What would be the reason you would, how would you put that gap on there while still leveraging that experience beforehand?
Yeah, so okay, so I think if I understand correctly, like maybe you served in the Marine Corps 15 years ago, but you still want to highlight the fact that you were in the Marine Corps and you served, but it's like 15 to 20 years old. So, and this is how I would recommend you touch on any of that earlier experience that goes back kind of beyond that 10 to 15 year, is you have a section at the bottom that says earlier career experience. And you put, team leader, United States Marine Corps, 5+ years of experience, 10+ years of experience, however many years that you served, and you give me a couple of bullet points of highlights of your service and what you accomplished in that earlier career. And that's the best way to get that kind of credit for being in the Marines, without saying I served in the Marines in 1990, right? So
Peter, can I speak to this real quick, if you don't mind?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
All right, Lori, thank you. I mean, absolutely amazing. This whole, you made the night perfect, you know? Thank you. So it was Marine Corps tour, 4 years, information systems officer. Right after that, a whole 10+ years in civilian work in IT, doing all kinds of things, all great things. 10+ years, and then chronic illness said stop. And then I had to go heal, go to India, do all these things. And then I became like involved in that line of work for a long time, the 15 years, right? So now, well, that doesn't pay gas, never mind anything else. So I have to shift, and I'm, you know, unemployed since, February 2020. So I want to bring my Marine Corps career as well as the IT back into play, and that's the cyber world for me. That's a perfect fit. So I'm in retraining now, and I'll be in retraining for a few months. That's the gap. That's the gap.
So here's what you're going to do, Eric. And I saw your resume, and I want you to reach out to me because I have some thoughts for you. So you're going to start with your education, your retraining that you're going through right now. You're going to highlight your education. It's going to go contact info, summary, education. Show me that you're in school right now, that you're recertifying, you're renewing your knowledge. Then you're going to go with relevant IT experience, right? So you're not going to go chronological. You're going to go rogue here. You're going to go relevant IT experience, and you're going to showcase your relevant IT experience. And then below that, you'll go recent experience, which will show some of your more of like your healing, your yoga, your things like that you've been into. Okay. And then it's going to be really important for you to talk about what happened in a non-specific way. So I don't want to take up too much time, but reach out to me, Eric. I have thoughts for you. Okay. Okay.
Awesome. Hey, Eric, also, thank you so much for asking those questions, because a lot of that stuff's really useful to have people hear the answers to. So I really appreciate it.
My honor. I supported the group on the questions. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay, Lori, is it okay with you if I ask you 2 more? I know we're at
I'm
5.
good. I can stay as long as you need me to.
You are the absolute best. Okay, so we've got another question. Do we put military awards at the bottom? I've gotten different feedback on that.
Military awards, especially a laundry list of military awards at the bottom of your resume, do you absolutely no good, because most people have no idea what they mean. So you have the Air Force, excellence award. What does that mean? So the only way your military awards are to help you or make an impact for you on your resume is to talk about them as accomplishments. And so you might say, recognized as the #1 of 300 managers in the organization due to achieving X, Y, and Z. Right? Or you could just say exceeded expectations, U.S. Air Force standards by 22%, awarded #1 of 300 managers as a result. That would be a way of working your awards in there. Now, your award packages, like the awards and the decks that you get, are full of great info that you can work into your resume as bullet points and accomplishments, but having a list of awards just doesn't do you any good on your resume. That would be better served to take those, 6 lines that those take up and put in like 3 really strong accomplishments instead.
Definitely. That's really helpful, Lori. So instead of putting, say, Army Achievement Medal, you would put the actual thing you received the medal for and, what that recognition signifies.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Awesome. You're probably going to have to translate it, right?
Right. Okay. This one, so I'm going to ask these 2 together as they're both kind of formatting related, and then one more, and it's I promise we'll stop peppering you with our questions, but I'm getting a lot out of this. My resume is going to look better. So I'm excited. So the first one is, if you remove the education section, because you don't want to date yourself, like you said, what do you put in its place? I think that, you could, I'll let you speak on that.
Let me clarify first.
Yeah.
I don't want you to remove your education.
Yeah.
I just want you to remove your dates of education.
Gotcha. Yeah.
My degree is still on my resume. I just don't tell you that I got it in a long time ago. So just take your dates off, not your education, right? So we want to clarify that, make sure we're really clear. I'm not advocating for you to remove old education from your resume, just the dates.
Awesome. Thank you for that clarification. And so the second on the formatting one, is the professional summary section applicable in today's job market and the way resumes are generally reviewed?
So I do still want you to have a summary section, but it should be brief, and you should use it as, instead of a catch-all, like use it to tell them what you're looking for, how many years of experience you have, and why you're specifically qualified to do that job. So that's what your summary really is today. I don't want you to just jump right into your chronology. Like, we're going to buy them dinner first, right? So we want to give them the summary. We want to warm them up, tell them a little bit about why we're good at what we do, and that's a great place for you to tell them, like, remember like we used to do objectives, seeking a challenging position. Yeah, we aren't doing objectives anymore. So we're using our summary to tell them what we're looking for. And so it's really serving the purpose of what we used to use an objective for, and it's giving a highlight. Okay.
Thank you so much. Okay, so the last question we will have today is, what about someone whose military experience is totally different from the degree earned in the area being transitioned into?
Okay, so this is a good one. So I had a United States Air Force Chief Master Sergeant who took 2 years off after she retired to go become a medical assistant. Pretty big difference. She was a maintenance chief. She was a maintenance pro super, maintenance superintendent, did all these like maintenance driven things. And now she wanted to go and be a medical assistant. Very different. And so instead of just talking about aircraft maintenance in her resume, this is the way her resume laid out. It was her contact info, her summary, her education, where we talked about her recently completed education. And then we took her 20-year military career and took the last 10 years of it and condensed it into project management, diagnosing malfunctions, following technical guidelines, and leading people and providing customer service. And that's how we translated her experience as being relevant to where she was going. Did we focus on aviation maintenance? No, there was not one aircraft word in that resume because that's not where she wanted to go. So what you need to think about is, where have I been and how does that relate to where I'm going? So what have you been doing and how can you leverage that into what you're doing today, right? And so, Peter, what you did in the military is very different than what you're doing today. Did you talk about how well you shot a gun on your resume?
No, my Excel skills eclipsed my firearm skills.
Right, and so we don't want to mess with Peter in an alley in San Francisco, but
might win.
I'm
not that tough.
Yeah, but we don't want to know about it on his resume, right? So again, you have to think about what you've done and how is it relevant and relatable to where you want to go.
Awesome. I think that's really helpful. So we had some questions about, if they got a comment on their resume, can they get it back? Lori, would you be up to email me those and I can distribute?
Yes, but I don't want to just email 6 people. I think all 20 should at least get some comments. So if you give me a few days, I'll give comments to all 20 people and I will get them to you. Okay? I just didn't make it through.
Hey,
I just got them on
nice of
Wednesday.
you.
So I will get them to you.
That's
And,
amazing.
yeah.
Thank you so much. Yeah, we definitely do owe Lori a beer, Greg. I completely agree. Me and her were talking about how we needed a drink today. So that's awesome. So someone asked, what if you weren't able to give Lori a resume ahead of time? So perfect caveat into what we're going to wrap up on. So we're going to do this every month for the next while until we decide not to, I guess. We're going to do this every month, a live resume review. You can submit your resume. You can come ask questions. Lori will do this, break down resumes and give you actual advice while you're looking at the paper so you can take it and implement it on your own as opposed to, you know, some vague thing that you're never actually gonna be able to use. On top of that, Lori was kind enough to offer some of her time for the next event to when people submit their resumes. We're going to give you an option to click if you'd be willing or if you would want an additional resume review following the event from Lori. And one person who attends the next event and submits a resume will get a free resume session with Lori afterwards. She's far too modest to say this, but people pay a lot of money and she's in very high demand for her expertise. So the fact that she's willing to come on and give us hours of her time and offer free resume reviews and to give comments on 20 resumes is absurd. So Lori, thank you so much.
You are very welcome. I'm happy to do it. This is, if you see my LinkedIn, if we're not connected already on LinkedIn, please send me a connection request and you will see that my headline says, I am on a mission to educate veterans on how to market themselves in the job search process. And that is what I'm here to do. So, and Greg, I'll give you my address so you can send me a beer, but I'd rather have a glass of wine. So, but I'll take a beer if that's all you got.
Awesome. Well, Lori, thank you so much. I just put Lori's LinkedIn in the chat, so make sure to follow her and connect with her. If you have any questions, please reach out to info@bootstobooks.com. You can reach out with literally anything, and we will respond to you, even if you just find a funny knock-knock joke on the internet. But thank you guys all so much for coming. Thank you, Lori. Look out for the recording at the next event next month.
See you guys.